ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a special episode of DirectXbox, a preview episode of DirectXbox, because we had the opportunity to check out Forza Motorsport a bit early for a preview. So I wanted to bring in co-host, of course, Nate the Hate, to talk about some Forza. Nate, how we doing?
Doing well. Very excited to talk about Forza Motorsport. As you said, we did have early access with a preview build of the game and got to put in a few hours with the game, get familiar with the tracks and a handful of cars, and see what Turn 10 has been, building for us in the garage over the last several years. And the first impression, I have to say, is very strong.
Okay, good. I will admit it's been a little while since I've played the simulation Forza track games. I'm a bigger fan, I think, of Forza Horizon, but I know Forza Motorsport has been very, very popular since the original Xbox. And I remember renting it way back then in 2005. It's actually the year right when the 360 was coming out. But it's been a staple for simulation racers ever since. People would say it's like one of the top tier one for that. So I was curious to see this game in the sense that Turn 10 has been working on this for a long time. They kind of moved around their typical release cadence for this one because they did so much work behind the scenes on the engine and all the little details. So they did give us access to a slice of the game, we'll say. We had only a handful of cars to pick from, although when the full game comes out, it's going to have, they said 500 cars or something, so there's going to be a lot to pick from. But with the preview, we had 5 vehicles that we ended up driving at one point in time, because they started us out with the Corvette E-Ray, which is this ridiculous car that just goes incredibly fast. They also have the Cadillac Racing V-Series R, and then the 3 we can pick from was a 2019 Subaru STI S209, a 2018 Honda Civic Type R, or a 2018 Ford Mustang GT. Which one did you pick initially, Nate?
Initially, I went with the Subaru.
That's what I went with. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, there you go. I figured, I'll go with the Subaru and then I'll move over to the Civic and then maybe the Mustang after that. I know that obviously the Subaru and the Civic are the big track cars that people will get, and the Mustang's like the straight line car. But I was curious how something like the STI would handle in this game. But after going through it, they give us the Builders Cup initially, which there's 5 tracks we have access to, and we can start. We can start right away with the visuals. We have some on-screen gameplay now, just kind of getting a feel for it. But because this game is very reliant, I would say, on 4K, obviously having a nice display and all this, it may not come through as much in YouTube's crushed video compression and all of this, but I did put it on. We have different video modes, so you can change the graphical style. They have performance RT, which is enable on-track ray tracing at 60 frames per second with variable resolution, and then just visuals. Maximum 4K visual quality on track with ray tracing at 30 frames per second. So you have options. They do still recommend performance, which is where they prioritize the 60 frames per second on track. Is that what you went with, Nate? That's the performance?
I did go with performance, and I had dabbled in the other 2 options, but I didn't feel as though the performance trade-off was, worthwhile in terms of feel. And I don't think the visual increase going to maximum 4K with ray tracing was worth going to 30 FPS. It really felt as though the visual difference was minimal if you went between the visual setting and performance setting. So I had played without the ray tracing because I felt as though in my time the ray tracing wasn't adding anything to the experience, at least not the ray tracing on the track.
I think it'll be much more apparent when you have your showcase for your car and you can get really close, because the details are immense for some of these different cars. And you notice that at times in the destruction, because it's highlighted a bit more around certain curves that get bumped up more than others. But the detail to each car is pretty impressive, and I think that's where the ray tracing will make more sense, because when you're flying around the track at 150 miles an hour, you're not like, oh wow, that that side mirror is very shiny. I get
Mhm.
the appeal of ray tracing for visual and the developer standpoint because it makes their game look better technically, but it's still such small details that it's not necessarily affecting the game as much to where it's worth the as you said, the performance trade off. But that said, performance. Let's talk about the actual racing. Again, it's been a little while since I've played. Well, it would have been Forza Motorsport 7 because now you have to buy the game physically to get it if you hadn't purchased it before. But I did check that one out a little bit. I just wanted to see, I guess, if I could tell any major difference necessarily. And the biggest thing I can say about Forza Motorsport is if you are a car enthusiast, you are going to get an absolute kick out of this game. Is that what you
Mhm.
noticed, Nate?
Yeah, the amount of options available to the player is simply staggering. And as you said, you can customize basically every facet of your vehicle, be it a gear, a spoiler, and you can go as far as actually going in, changing the pressure of your tire or removing gasoline from your tank to increase the speed or even how your car will grip a turn to give you a slight advantage during a race. So if you're looking at your fuel gauge and you realize I'm only racing a 3 lap race, I need 10% of my gas tank full. You can lower it to 10% and you'll be shown that fractions of a second will be taken off your potential fastest lap time to give you that slight edge that you may need to finish in first place. And the fact that you can go through that level of customization was really impressive. And this is something that, those hardcore car enthusiasts will appreciate, and they'll go through every minor option, every upgrade available to them, and they will craft a perfectly tuned vehicle that is well equipped to handle the turns and the grip of the track of any race that you are really preparing for. And you can customize your vehicle for every single race. It's not exclusive to just the cup. Every race you can go into and you can change any setting. So you can make the game really your own experience and you can cater it to your specific skill set and just make the game how you want it to be enjoyed. And that's really great in terms of accessibility because the game doesn't limit it to just those who are well versed in cars and mechanic issues. It can be played by anybody and there's enjoyment to be found.
I noticed that though as I'm going through because when right before each race you're kind of in the pit and they essentially let you do what you want to do to change up how your car is driving, how it's turning, how it's going around bends, and looking through all the different options. We didn't really have access to all of it necessarily because again it's a limited preview, but you have like your steering wheel steering lock range, your differential for rear, front, center, braking, your downforce, your roll center height offset. I mean, I'm just sending off different elements that I'm sure people who are really into tuning are getting behind right now. But there's a lot here in terms of changing up your car and meeting certain tracks demands, which is something they definitely lean into from what I've seen, where they're trying to get you to understand each and every turn of these different tracks to where you really get to know them.
Mhm.
And the idea is, of course, taking each line as best as possible because this game is indeed, they talked about this before, it is indeed a car RPG or car PG. CARPG. And
Yeah,
you notice that right away when you're playing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very accurate descriptor of what the game is because during a race, there are various segments that the game is grading you on, depending on how you take a turn, how you overtake the opposition, and it grades you. And you can get as low as a 1, or you can go as high as I believe it's either an 8 or a 10. I haven't scored above a 7.5, so I'm not sure what the higher limit is. And you gain experience based on how you are racing several times throughout a single lap and you'll level up potentially a couple of times during each race. So you're always feeling as though you're rewarded if you perform well, and you want to strive to do better each lap. And you recognize where you could do better. You know how you took that turn and say, okay, I didn't do that all that clean. Second time around, I'm going to make sure I maybe stay a little further away from the edge of the track. I don't drive off track and get penalized And it's a really nice experience how they implemented such a feature.
They do give you the typical Forza drive line, so you can follow it. It'll turn red to slow down. It'll turn like this bluish color when you're good to go, or you can even speed up. So they do try to help you out with that. And there are a lot of driver assists if you're someone who's maybe not super into racing games, but you like the idea of trying one out just to see how it goes. They have a lot to help you out with for assists, and you can change them pretty quickly on the fly. So like they have maximum assist, heavy assist, moderate, balanced, light. You can just turn them off completely, minimum. So it is kind of molded in that sense too, where it'll help you with your throttle, steering, traction control, braking. But it has that sense of you can go all out if you want, or kind of walk past a lot of this stuff and just have an enjoyable experience. So I assume they took a lot of that from feedback of these menus are kind of overwhelming. I just want to get to the race. You can do that pretty quickly. But the thing with, as I mentioned, it's a car PG. As you're going around those bends that we just discussed and you're getting graded, you're getting experience points in real time, and your car will level up on the fly as you're driving. And I found that kind of interesting because it does sort of take some of the monotony and sort of, I guess, it being kind of tedious at times to do longer races, because every time you go around a corner, you have a chance to add to that skill bar, that experience bar, and it kind of just keeps pulling you forward in that sense, that carrot on a stick. I think that's actually a great idea for a racing game like this to have.
Yeah, because you're not just being graded on where you finish now. It's based on how well you're racing throughout the entire, that entire lap or the entire circuit. So being rewarded consistently is definitely going to inspire people to stick with those longer races and try to do their best and not just say, well, I just need to get in the top three, or I just need to finish in a certain position and I'll go to the next race because I'm leading in the leaderboards as is with points. Now you want to do better because it's a constant opportunity to improve your car. And once you finish that race, you'll be given the opportunity to, you know, go through performance and upgrade your vehicle before the next race. So you want to perform the best you can. And as you mentioned, there are a variety of accessibility options to help you with steering, acceleration, braking. And if you want to make it a full on simulation, you can. If you want to go for a little more of a hand holding, not quite an arcade experience, but something a little similar to that, you also have that option to you. And it goes even beyond that when it comes to options, because you have the drivatar difficulty that you will select before each race. And that can go from a 1, which will make your competition slower, or you can go all the way to an 8. And depending on what you choose, it will also have a difficulty bonus. So if you choose 1, you will get no difficulty bonus. But if you go to an 8, you'll get a 50% difficulty bonus. So that's a huge reward. But obviously, your competition is going to race a lot more aggressive and much faster. So you're going to have to really have a strong car if you're willing to go to that high of a level. But then there's also the rule set bonus. So each race you can choose between club rules, sports rules, and expert rules. And these have different factors to them. With club rules, you have cosmetic damage, you have the option of rewind, and you have limited penalties. So the penalties in a race would be the situations where if you have a collision, if you drive off track, you will be penalized a full on second, maybe more, depending on how reckless you were driving. And that comes with a 5% bonus. Then you have the sport rule, which is simulated fuel and tire. It has the rewind option and it has moderate penalties, and that gives you a 6% bonus. But then expert, that has simulated damage, fuel, and tire impacts. Rewind is disabled, and you have full penalties, but that grants you a 10% bonus. And in my time with the preview, I had been racing under the expert rules, and it was very rewarding to get not only that 10% bonus, but to have to kind of consider how I was going to race, because the damage did have impacts on my vehicle. And at one point, just for fun, I wanted to see how far I could go. I went into a head-on collision.
Okay, yeah, explain
And
this, Nate. So there is destruction in this game, as in your car can get all kinds of messed up. They went over this, and that was something that I would see some people kind of get annoyed about or complain about with other racing games, especially ones that are more simulation based on the track. You don't get that kind of destruction to it, but they said that you would have it in when they were showing this off at different events, whether it was like their E3 kind of event or developer showcase. Okay, what's the destruction in this game? What are we dealing with?
So you will see cosmetic scratch, some dings and dents in your vehicle, but it's more so the internal stuff that's really going to impact how you're racing. So when I did my head-on collision, I completely
You just
destroyed the
turned
car.
around and ran it. You just went
Yep.
backwards in the track.
Yeah, I had initially used my e-brake and I flipped the car over and I wanted to see what it did. And I had some structural damage and some suspension damage. I was like, that's not enough. I have to go one step further. So I went head-on collision and immediately the screen just flashed with severe engine damage, severe transmission damage, and the car would just sputter. I couldn't go above 25 miles an hour. And eventually, as I was trying to race around the track, the game just forced me into the pit because it needed repairs. I obviously was never going to finish a full lap at that point. And that was a really cool thing because I wasn't expecting it to go that far. And during just a traditional race, you're bumping up against people and you'll see the outline of your car in the lower section of the UI, and it will change color based on the damage you're receiving. So if it goes red, your car is shot. You're going to have to go to the pit. And I liked how that simulation was offered on this higher setting. Now, this is completely an option. You don't have to race that way. You can continue to race. We'll just have some of the cosmetic damage. We'll see the scratches and dings, but your car won't be negatively impacted by it. But the fact that this option does exist where you can destroy your car essentially, I really like that because it gives it more of an authentic feel. And when you're racing on those higher difficulties, some cars will try to drive you off the road. They'll
I
try to
noticed that.
spin you, and you kind of sit there get a little aggravated with it because if you act in retaliation, you're going to be hit with a penalty, which could be 10 seconds to your final time. So it doesn't matter if you finished in first and only won by a second. You're going to end up being placed potentially in the lower quadrants of the race avatars, and maybe you actually are going to get a finish of 15th, and you're not going to get those reward bonuses that you saw.
Dude, that AI is like vengeful. Sometimes you'll overtake them, and then they'll come up like next to you and just try to nudge your back corner a bit. It feels like that you're actually playing against someone like next to you, or like a friend or something who's like, I'm gonna take this guy out.
The AI is really good here. It's not just that. It's not that just that like simple AI where they're like, okay, I have to stick as close to the line myself to get a good time. It feels as though they are other racers and they will take you out if if you try to block them, they will hit you. And I thought that was a really nice touch. And another nice touch I found is that whenever you start a race, you have the option of choosing your starting position. You can start in first place, where you'll have a significantly lower tier reward, or you can start all the way back in last, and your reward is substantially higher. So you have a bit of a high risk, high reward type thing going there, and the game will forecast the projected placement that you'll finish. So you could look at it and say, okay, I'm going to start in 12th place, and the game will tell you, well, right now we're forecasting that you'll finish from 3rd to 5th, and you'll see your bonus. Let's say it's 2,500 points. You say, you know what? I did my practice laps really well. I'm confident that I can finish in first. So you'll take that challenge. Or you might be saying, this race has a lot of turns. I'm not taking them all that well. I prefer starting in first place to give myself that edge. I'll sacrifice that bonus point and focus on just trying to finish in a strong position and finish the race in that top 3. And the fact that you have this option that you can weigh and really challenge yourself, I thought was a nice touch.
There's one more thing I want to mention as we're finishing up here with the preview. We're of course we're going to be doing some more coverage of this as we get closer to launch. This game coming out October 10th, but there was something that caught me off guard a little bit here, and I was not expecting this at all. The rumble in this game is way better than I was expecting.
Yeah, it's exceptional. You can feel that difference of terrain on on not even just the car, but also on the racing circuit itself. So if you drive off road, it does feel as though you're hitting something of a different texture.
This is with the
than the
Xbox
racetrack
controller.
itself.
This is with the Xbox Series controller. It's not like, I'm not even talking about using a wheel or something. And the controller that they have still uses the older rumble technology. Of course, there are rumble motors in the triggers as well, but they have done something here to where actually caught off guard. Like, I noticed, I was like, oh wow, this is a significant improvement over basically any other racing game I've played on the Xbox when it comes to their I guess you say immersion, or their rumble motors that they have to go along with the game. So they don't have the same advanced haptic feedback for, say, that the Nintendo or Sony has, but Turn 10's done something really cool here, because as you mentioned, when you go over the different terrains, whether it's gravel or you go into the grass, or even if you take a turn kind of hard and you hear like your tires starting to squeal a bit, it all translates to the controller, and it's interesting. As I mentioned, it's good enough to where it caught me off guard. And the reason I really bring that up is I had to try to check in with Sean very vaguely and ask him about his wheel. He has like a Thrustmaster wheel, I believe, for Xbox. I don't have a wheel. I might get one for Forza. I don't know. Someone in the comments, let me know what's the wheel to get on the Xbox within reason. Okay. And I'm going to build the $4,000 triple monitor build, but within reason, what's the somewhat enthusiast wheel to get? I'm curious how much this translates to the wheel itself, if that also has some sort of rumble built in to go along with it. Because if it does, I think that Sean mentioned it did. This is going to be an incredible experience for enthusiasts.
Yeah, the feedback that the game gives you was really surprising, and it pairs so well with the sound design as well. Because as you mentioned, you can hear that tire kind of screech when you're taking a corner very sharp, and maybe the car is just on that edge of holding grip to it. And the controller in the rumble gives you that feedback where it's "Grrr," and you feel that. And I mean, it was a really nice touch. Even when a car kind of bumps into you, you get that quick jolt. It's not just the default hard shake of the rumble. It's really reflective of what is happening on the track. So very impressive rumble here. Probably the best use of rumble the Xbox has seen, not just for racers, but I think gaming in general. And it was almost surprising that we don't have that haptic type of rumble here, because for a second, if you told me it was, I think I would have believed you.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It is, but I'm looking forward to the game. There's a lot here. If you're an enthusiast, big time Forza fan, you're probably already on board with this. I don't need to mention much else for you. But if you're someone casually looking at this, I think they've streamlined, from what I've seen with the preview so far and the limited amount of time we've had. I think they've done a pretty good job streamlining it. So I'm looking forward to checking out this game more. It is coming out October 10th, so hey, keep an eye out for DirectXbox, as we will be doing some more coverage, especially as the game releases, and we can talk more about apparently the 500 some odd cars, all the different tracks involved here. So exciting stuff. Thanks everyone for joining us for our Forza Motorsport preview, and we'll see you guys next time.